Hi, this is Krish, Krishnan, Chairman CEO of Krystal Biotech. As a company, we would like to thank ARM for giving us an opportunity to do this presentation. We will be making some forward-looking statements today, so please take a minute or so to read the forward-looking statements. So in terms of Krystal, just to give a quick overview, we're a clinical stage, fully integrated gene therapy company, and we are powered by this virus called HSV1, which we use to deliver the missing gene or the missing gene to a patient with a monogenic disease, and I'll get into it in a little bit. It's truly a differentiated platform compared to some of the other gene therapy stories you may have heard, both in terms of the ability to redose, and that's gaining a lot of traction and momentum, especially when the gene therapy story is starting to become more about gene delivery, based on some of the recent data from other companies in the gene therapy space. As a company, we started initially about in the middle of 2016, started to focus on rare dermatological indications. We showed rapid proof of concept, expanded our pipeline in rare skin diseases. And we are in a phase 3 trial, a pivotal trial on our lead product for the treatment of dystrophic epidermolysis bullosa. And we're slowly broadening that focus to target larger indications within skin, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, and expanding into pulmonary areas with our product called KB407, targeting cystic fibrosis, and I'll try to get into the pipeline and the timelines in a little bit. And we stay fully integrated because we have one GMP facility that is up and running, that is providing the clinical materials for the pivotal trial, but we're also in the middle of constructing a second, much larger GMP facility that is anticipated to be online in the middle of 2022. And besides the research and the development and the manufacturing, we're also building out a commercial team in Boston in anticipation of the launch of KB103, our lead product that's in pivotal trial. Just a little bit about the HSV1 virus. Herpes simplex virus has many unique properties and makes it a great vehicle for delivering genes and other exogenous materials to cells. The first thing to note about HSV1 is that it has a huge payload capacity. So when you're dealing with large genes, like in skin, where the size of the gene is 9 kb or greater, or the CFTR gene, for example, the payload capacity of HSV1 allows us to deliver the gene in vivo into the cells of interest. Second, the vector inherently is episomal, which means that when it's in the nucleus, it does not integrate into your host DNA. And vectors that tend to integrate with your host DNA or have a propensity for accidental integration are amenable or have a propensity for insertional mutagenesis, or some kind, in kinds of something getting messed up in your host DNA. And by the vector remaining episomal, that provides a level of safety, a level of safety to the whole gene delivery motif. Third thing to note, because it's an episomal virus and does not integrate into your DNA, it naturally affords the ability to repeat dose. And one of the other modifications Krystal has made to the vector is to make it non-replicating. So we're essentially talking about a non-replicating, non-integrating vector, and so which essentially has a functional role of gene delivery, which, as I mentioned earlier, in the gene therapy space is gaining a lot of prominence. And if you note on the side, if you note at the table on the side, we kind of compare some of the unique properties of HSV1 to some of the other vectors that have been used in gene therapy before, whether it be lentivirus or AAV virus. And that table kind of provides how this vector differentiates especially when you're delivering a gene to tissues that have a rapid turnover. Like if the skin cells turn over or if the respiratory cells turn over, the ability to redose becomes really important. And once we modify the vector and insert the gene, depending on the particular disease or indication, we have a few ways of delivering the gene to the tissue or to the cells of interest. For our lead indication, BVAC and some of the rare skin diseases, we deliver them topically. In the aesthetic indication, which is fully owned in a separate subsidiary, we're delivering it intradermally. The cystic fibrosis, which I mentioned to you, we're nebulizing the vector, and so it's delivered through a nebulizer. So multiple routes of administration. And as a company, we're looking at other potential routes under investigation, being able to deliver the gene to a patient who's either missing a gene or a particular gene is mutated. We're simply affording another copy of that gene or of the missing or mutated gene. Just in terms of very highly on the pipeline, as I mentioned to you, BVAC is in phase 3. We plan to complete enrollment in 1Q with the data readout anticipated in the second half of this year. We are also anticipating announcing phase 2 data on the second indication for ichthyosis in the first half of this year, and expect to file an IND on Netherton syndrome, all three of the above being rare skin diseases, an IND on Netherton syndrome by the end of this year. So that's the rare disease franchise. In cystic fibrosis, where we're delivering the gene to the respiratory cells, we anticipate initiating a clinical study in the first half. And we're so excited by the data to date, the preclinical data on our ability to safely deliver this missing gene, that we have expanded into other rare lung diseases. And we intend to announce a new program in the first half of 2021. Besides those two, in the aesthetic indication, we're in the clinic with the safety readout on an aesthetic indication anticipated in the first quarter of 2021. Now, given this meeting is anticipated to be in April and the recording is a bit ahead of the meeting, it is likely that some of these milestones would have been met by the time, potentially met by the time you're listening to the actual presentation. And we're, of course, trying to get into broader skin diseases. As I mentioned earlier in the call, we have 2 GMP facilities, one that's up and running and one that's in construction. The second one, as you can see from the picture, and this picture that you see is now looking more and more real as the construction of the outer building has been complete. It's about 150,000 square feet that is expected to come online in the middle of 2022. But currently, we have a GMP facility that is operational and validated to produce pivotal and clinical materials. And so we would launch with then KRYS, which is a smaller facility, and then Astra would come online as a backup as we expand our pipeline products. So if you step back and look at 2021, is turning out to be a very crucial year for the company with a whole bunch of milestones and readouts. And I'll quickly walk you through. Obviously, I mentioned BVAC, which is in pivotal trials. Just to give you a primer on BVAC, earlier last year, we completed a phase 1/2 study. The results were very positive. And so the pivotal study was designed to significantly leverage some of the phase 1/2 trial design in terms of having an active versus in terms of being placebo-controlled, randomized, and in the case of the pivotal being double-blinded. But in terms of endpoints and stat analysis, trying to leverage what we observed because we observed good separation from placebo in the phase 1/2, and we're trying to leverage that in the pivotal trial. So fingers crossed, stay tuned. The expectation is to announce data in the second half of this year. So we're excited about the program, and a lot of the data on the phase 1/2 study is on our website, including some of the stat analysis that was conducted in the phase 1/2 aspect of the study. The second milestone, just in terms of sequential, is the aesthetic indication, KB301. We have a safety readout in the first half, and assuming the safety readout is good, and maybe the expectation is to go into 2 efficacy indications in the aesthetic indication, one for fine lines and one for acne scars. Now, we also, and I mentioned earlier, that the aesthetic programs are being developed in a separate subsidiary. And the reason for that is to keep Krystal as a pure play, fully integrated rare disease type company, and develop some of the aesthetic broader skin disease, the aesthetic programs in a separate sub, financed independently, and basically the company telling not one story that involves rare disease and aesthetics, but two stories, one that's very pure and clean on rare diseases and one on aesthetics, because the aesthetics marketplace is so different, both in terms of reimbursement, both in terms of prevalence, both in terms of the plethora of indications. And so we're trying to keep them separate between Krystal and the subsidiary June. Just to come back on the first half, we also have an announcement on a rare disease, which is lamellar ichthyosis. We started a phase 2 study about 4, 5, 6 months ago, middle of last year. So we'll announce the data on a patient from the phase 2 study, which will set the work plan going forward on that particular indication. So announce the data and update on what happens next on ichthyosis. We're also excited about announcing preclinical data, additional preclinical data. We have some data on CF on the preclinical that was very exciting to us. Additional data in preclinical data on CF, and getting started on a phase 1 study for cystic fibrosis in the first half of this year. And as I mentioned earlier in this conversation, the data to date has been so exciting in terms of being able to deliver to the respiratory cells that we have another compound in the preclinical stages, and we would kind of announce what that program is around the time of getting started on the pivotal trial, on the phase 1 trial for CF. So we're excited by the depth we have in the rare disease skin franchise. We're excited about moving into the respiratory programs, and then totally as an optionality on the rare disease story are the aesthetic indications, which could potentially open up a variety of skin conditions to treat. But coming back to what is front and center and the most important for Krystal this year, obviously, is the BVEC study. The BVEC study is in pivotal. So once we announce the data, we anticipate filing a BLA shortly thereafter. We're aligned with the EMA on what is needed for a marketing authorization, MAA filing. It is important to know that KB103 enjoys both RMAT designation, which is like breakthrough designation in the US, and PRIME designation in Europe. But all 4 of our rare disease programs are also eligible for what is known as a pediatric review voucher. But once we file the BLA, the expectation is to file the marketing authorization. We're building out a commercial team, anticipating with a very crucial focus on a US launch, but also slowly expanding the commercial team to start thinking about a EU launch, which is anticipated shortly after the US launch. So that commercial team and the medical affairs component associated with commercialization, that team is being built up in Boston. The majority of the rest of the company in terms of research and development and manufacturing and process development, process improvements are all based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We're about 70 employees or so, anticipating to go up to north of 100 by the end of the year. The balance sheet is very strong. We ended the year with about $270 million and recently supplemented the balance sheet with about $150 million or so in a couple subsequent offerings. So we're in a really good place from being able to invest and accelerate some of these programs without having to look over our shoulders on the macro conditions in the economy, et cetera. So we put ourselves in a good place financially. We're building out a great team, and the long-term objective of the company is to be a fully integrated rare disease company and hopefully a spin-out in the aesthetic space. So thank you so much. And again, thanks to ARM for the invitation.